From dog tags to ownership, heroes take the lead. Stories of veterans building dreams with passion, drive, and speed. From service to success, we're here to inspire the quest. Dog tags to ownership, we're the best. Take the prize.
From the battlefield to the boardroom, this is Dog Tags to Ownership, the podcast where veterans share their journeys from serving our nation to leading in business. Hear inspiring stories of grit, growth, and the entrepreneurial spirit that drives those who serve to succeed. Tune in and take the first step toward your own mission in entrepreneurship.
Military One Percenters, welcome to Dog Tags to Ownership, where once a week we interview veterans who chart a path towards entrepreneurship. Here, our goals are to share resources, advice, and success stories about starting a business, discuss strategies for building financial independence and creating your own path, and most importantly, build a community to support each other through the challenges of transitioning from service life to civilian ownership. Today, we're extremely excited to introduce our guest to the show, Scott Lackey. Scott is an Army combat veteran, Ironman athlete, patent inventor, and author of the book, Wake Up to Die Again. However, Scott's greatest strength is unpacking the most crucial aspect of veteran entrepreneurship, how to turn collapse into comeback. Scott, welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for joining us today to discuss your journey from turning your dog tags into ownership. How are you doing?
I am doing great, Julie, and hello, Matt, and thank you. And I just want to say I love the dog tags to ownership. So just wanted to say that for everybody. I appreciate being here.
Thank you. We appreciate you you coming on and just to tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and what you have done in the entrepreneurship realm and how you have turned your dog tags into ownership. But before we get into all that stuff, can we first just start with you telling us a little bit about yourself and your military service?
Absolutely. So I joined the military in 1987, and I did 4 years of active duty with the United States Army and then 4 years of National Guard service when I transitioned out of the military to go to college. So I did it, the opposite of everybody. I did 4 years of active duty, then I went to college. And during my active duty, I had a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful experience. I had the greatest leaders I've ever worked for in my life, ever, even to this day. And so I enlisted as what was called a 72 Echo at the time, which is a tactical telecommunications operator. But I really never worked the MOS, even though I went to the school in Fort Gordon, Georgia. But I had a choice of duty stations, and so I elected to go to Germany after AIT, and they sent me to Germany, and I was immediately put in, y'all may remember this, in what was called a Pershing II nuclear missile unit, and with the 56th Field Artillery Command. So during that 2 years there, I won't go into the details, but I got tapped on the shoulder and I got to be a driver for a 2-star general. And that was an amazing experience. I really shouldn't have been there because that position is normally reserved for military police. And it was a series of circumstances that allowed me to do that. And then after that, I was a driver for the deputy commander. And then I got a choice of duty stations there. And I said I wanted to go to the 1st Infantry Division at Fort Riley, Kansas, not far from you, Matt. And so they sent me to Junction City to Fort Riley, Kansas. And I loved the 1st Infantry Division. And it was there when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and they woke me up in Beanock at 3:00 in the morning and said, "This is not a drill. Pack your bags. You're going to the desert." And we were all like, what just happened? Because we had trained for the European theater, right? We didn't have desert camo. We had green camo. And, but as it turns out, it wasn't a false alarm, but we weren't leaving that day. And so they said, get back to work at Beanock, and when you get back to your unit, you'll pack up and go over to the desert. So I did. Went to the desert, Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And as with the 1st Infantry Division, we were one of the northernmost units with 7 Corps that cut off the Iraqi Guard and kept keeping them from escaping into Baghdad. And that was that. Came home and decided that after all the burning oil wells that it was not the time to re-enlist in the desert. I was going to come back home and do what I promised my family, as I was going to go to college and get a degree and stay in the National Guard. And that was my 4 years of active duty in a nutshell.
You packed a lot. You packed a lot into that 4 years. And I'm curious, was the circumstances that put you into that driver position, did that involve the military police soldiers getting in trouble?
It's such an innocent story, believe it or not. I got to my unit to work my MOS. Our platoon sergeant was brand new, and he was a former drill sergeant. It was written all over his body and face. And we had a brand new lieutenant. I mean, brand spanking new butter bar. And our platoon sergeant said, in normal military fashion, I need a volunteer. And stupid me, I just raised my hand. I'm in Germany. Let's go see what's going on in Germany. And of course, everybody laughed. And I knew why. And so he brought me up there and he said, "You're the new driver for the LT. He's downstairs. Go meet him." And so that's how it happened. And I went and met the LT. And so I drove for him all over Southern Germany for a short period of time. Well, anyway, when the CG needed a new adjutant, I didn't know this, but it's common practice that every officer applies for the job. And my LT, who should not have actually gotten picked, it's a job for a first lieutenant or second lieutenant. But anyway, he shouldn't have gotten the job. And he got selected. And when he got over there, the CG said, "We need a driver." And he says, "I got one." And I went over and interviewed and boom, I was there. And so it's innocent, but that's how I got there.
That's neat.
Yeah, that's a really cool story actually, and it's about networking and connections back as a young private specialist in the Army, being able to go and be the CG's driver.
Yeah. And of course, everything changed when I did that. You walked on water.
Mhm.
Majors were scared of me. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I had not, and they would want to know things like, does he like Mountain Dew? Do you need maps? I was just like, man, get away from me. Y'all are freaking me out.
All those kiss ass officers, Julie.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, all of so you transitioned off of active duty, and did you go back to Georgia, and that's where you, went to
No,
college?
so actually I was born in Jonesboro, Arkansas, the northeast corner of Arkansas, near Memphis. That's where I went into the MEP station and went from there. So believe it or not, when I was over in the desert, it was very difficult for me to not re-enlist. And it was like, "Scott, this is the place, man. Get one of the AKs we've captured, stand in front of the burning oil wells, to swearing in." It was hard because I was like, this sounds pretty good. But what happened is during when we were in Kuwait, northern Kuwait, I was out on guard duty one night, and we had been, I'm sorry, not northern Kuwait, we were in northern Saudi Arabia before the war started, and we had been laying all this communication line. I mean, miles and miles of bearing stuff, right? And there was like 7, 8, 9 of us doing it. And to make a long story short, one night on guard duty, or one morning, 3 so in the morning, I just had this epiphany. It was like this thought placed in my head, sent chills up my spine of this apparatus that would dig a trench. It would lay the cable or unspool it and lay the cable. And then we could drag a chain or something behind it and cover it up with the sand. And the next day, I couldn't sleep. We made a crude example of this and hitched it to the truck, and it worked. There was 3 of us, somebody driving the truck, somebody holding the unit, and me standing on the back of it as the weight, right? And it worked. And we came up with a name that day. We called it the Wire Dog. And it was such an explosive thought in my mind that it was of course, it was what I dreamed of. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to have something to build. And so coming up with this idea in the military over in the desert, right before, I had to make a decision of re-enlist or go to college or do something. When I got this idea, that's what sold it for me. I said, no, I'm not re-enlisting. This is my dream. I am leaving and going to college, and I'm building a business around the Wire Dog, and I'm going to be rich, and I'm going to be famous. I'm going to make $1 million, and this is what I'm going to do. And that was my attitude. I'm going to make it happen. That was really the ceiling deal of why I left and transitioned and went to the National Guard.
And so that idea of the wire dog, and I saw, that it's patented by you?
Actually, that was my second invention that got patented. This was my
Okay.
very first invention that did not get patented. It was supposedly patent pending. That doesn't really mean anything. I spent a lot of money that didn't work. But no, that was my first idea. And to be honest with you, it was a good idea and it did work. But looking back, there were limited applications where it would work, but I didn't know what I was doing. And this mindset that I left the military with, and I think we can all relate to this. I tell people all the time when they say, "What did you leave the military with?" I'll say, "Well, it certainly wasn't money. I spent everything." Okay. I left with 3 words. And this was drilled into me and I loved it and it inspired me as a soldier. Make it happen. And I was empowered by that by my leaders because they knew I would find the one way, right? Not the 99 ways to know. And they empowered me to do that. And so I left, and I left under that mentality. When I got to college, I went to make it happen extreme. But here's what I didn't know when I transitioned from dog tags to being a civilian. It's a different world out there, brother. And there was a lot of people that disagreed vehemently with what I was doing. And it was honestly, to be transparent, it was actually very rough for me to transition from what I excelled at exceptionally. I got promoted faster than my peers. You could cut butter with the crease and starch in my uniform. You could shave out of the polish in my boots. my hair was always high and tight. What do we say was low speed and high drag? I mean, excuse me, the high speed, low drag. That was the life I lived. I really did for 4 years. But that none of that for the invention, none of that transferred for me.
So you're in college. What do you major in college, and how does, what do you go into after that?
Yeah, I was majoring in finance. I couldn't stand accounting, but I loved finance. And part of that had to do with the movie that came out when I was in college. It was called Barbarians at the Gate. Y'all remember that movie? So it was based loosely and a little ridiculously on a famous, what was called a leveraged buyout, a debt-based buyout of a company called RJ Reynolds and Nabisco and all this. All these famous firms. I mean, they made a movie about it and it came out. And that just triggered me as I wanted to do something like that. That's where finance came from. I didn't want to work at a bank. I just wanted to be in that kind of deal-making finance. And man, you pair that with my entrepreneurial drive and an invention and being in college. I mean, it was steroids again, but it didn't work, but it was steroids.
So where did you land? What kind of career field did you land in then after your finance degree?
Yeah, actually, this is typical of my life, which is I got a job in medical sales
Mhm.
with a finance degree.
Perfect.
Right. And it was because nothing that I tried to do in the finance direction became viable. Nothing. It was like running into brick wall after brick wall. I want to tell you a quick story. I think the listeners will appreciate this. It was very creative and very entrepreneurial of me. Standing at my apartment one day, opening it up, and there were never any bills in there. It was just filled with junk mail as a college student. And I remember standing there one day and I was looking at my name on all this junk mail. I was like, how do these people get my address? I'm in an apartment. And then it dawned on me, because by the way, another thing, I love flying. I don't want to fly a plane, but I love flying. I love travel, love adventure. And one of my dreams in college is I want to work for American Airlines, because I always wanted to live in Dallas, Texas. So to make a long story short, I said, you know what? If these people can find my name 12 feet from my apartment and get a letter to me, I'll bet I could get a letter to the president and CEO of American Airlines. And how would I do that? We go to the library, because that was Google back then. So I drop my bag, march over to the library, and I don't remember what book I found, but some periodical or whatever, and I found the president and CEO of American Airlines, and he was a rebel. He was a trailblazing rebel, and I loved him. Robert Crandall was his name. Found his address, sent a letter to him, and I thought, you know what? If I can send one to him, I can send it to all the airlines. As a matter of fact, I'm going to send one to that investment firm from the movie KKR, Kohlberg, Kravis, and Roberts. So anyway, I sent all these letters out. The only one I cared about getting back was from American Airlines. And guess what? I got a letter back from Robert Crandall himself. This was my junior year of college. And he said, Scott, you're too far. Thank you for your letter, enthusiasm. You're too far away from graduation. But what I want you to do is when you get closer to graduation, I want you to send me another letter. So that following December, I couldn't send the letter, picked up the phone and called, got transferred a couple of times this is what I told him, by the way. It called the 800 number. Hello, yeah, who's this, right? well, this is Scott Lackey, and I'm calling for the president, Robert Crandall. Who are you? Well, he sent me a letter, and I'm responding to the letter.
We're pen pals.
I was smiling when I said this, right? But anyway, I get to his assistant, and she didn't believe me, as you can imagine. She made me read the letter to her, and her whole tone changed when that happened. And she said, he can't speak to you right now, but what I'm going to need you to do is copy that letter and send it to me right away. She said, do you have the address? I said, the same one I sent it to last year. She goes, yeah, that'll work. Yeah. Anyway, I actually got invited because of that. I actually got invited to be interviewed to potentially attend their management program in Dallas, Texas.
That's awesome.
And well, that's an awesome idea. I earned the right from being very creative and entrepreneurial. I earned the right to come into the room, so to speak. I got the interview, and it was the most horrific interview I've ever had in my life. I bombed it like you could not bomb it any worse than I did. You couldn't. I can remember it almost. I really can. I can remember it that well. So that was what blew up in my face in December, January of my senior year. So I had nothing. And I won't tell you the story, but it was some fortuitous events that happened, being at the right place at the right time. But this company it was a medical company. They only hired athletes, people that had an athletic background, to be in their sales force, because they knew that athletes knew how to work together and knew how to win. And you throw in my military background on top of being an athlete in high school and an athlete in college, it was a trifecta for me. And they hired me and sent me to Dallas, where I've always wanted to be. And I took over a failing territory there. Out of 150 territories or 125, it was in the bottom 5%. It was a match made in heaven for what I wanted to do. Not in medical sales per se, but the territory they gave me. So it's a roundabout way of getting it. And that's a long answer, Matt, but I had to tell you that.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's a good story.
So you wanted to patent Wire Dog and move that along, but and I know looking on your website that did not work out.
Yep,
But then you were able to patent something,
I
another
did.
product. So can you talk a little bit about that and how you moved on from Wire Dog into to your next journey?
Yes, and to the listeners, right, especially if you've got a creative idea, something that you want to take to market, I want you to hear this story. It was actually this idea, again, believe it or not, it was similar to the Wire Dog, but it was a Friday night. I called on all the hospitals in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex and outside of the Metroplex. And my worst day and best day, the entire time I was with this company, always occurred at the same hospital, at Cook Children's Hospital in Fort Worth, Texas. I could not believe as a young man what I witnessed of how these doctors and nurses took care of babies and people and families. It's unbelievable what they did. But it also broke my heart to see the families and the babies and all that stuff because I was behind the scenes as a medical rep. I got home late one Friday night. I was only at my apartment 11:30 latest. I didn't get home that night till 6, 7 o'clock because I was in the emergency room trying to get some things approved at the last minute. I got a phone call as soon as I walked in the door at my apartment, and it was the neonatal intensive care unit. It's called the NICU, saying, Scott, can you come back? I'm sorry to have to ask you, can you come back? We're out of temperature sensors. I was like, doesn't the OR have some? Can't you call the emergency room? Like, Scott, we've called everybody. Nobody has it. Will you come back? And I paused because I was trying to figure out a way to get out of this because I was tired. I said, no problem. I'll come back. Get in the car, drive down there. I get to the NICU. As I walk in, they all know me. They smile. And she hands me this little preemie baby that you could hold in one hand. And she says, he needs some mail time. So go over there in the rocking chair while we look through these temperature sensors you brought us. So sitting in that rocking chair, they're dimly lit, right? You hear it, they're warm. You hear the beeping of the machines every once in a while, but literally sitting there looking at that baby, thinking to myself, man, what happened to you to get here? And I say that importantly because leading up to that moment, I was just tired doing my job. But right then, looking at that baby, a fully formed thought, a glimpse, a thought was in my head, and I didn't know what the name of it was. But it was a booklet that would be everything a child will need from birth to some age. I didn't even know what age, but I could see the pages. I could see the size. I could see the content. It was an image, and it freaked me out because I'd had this experience before and it didn't work out. And I raced home after that, and I spent the next 2.5 days sitting in my home office at the apartment, trying to get this stuff out of my head that I only got a glimpse of before I forgot it to get it on paper. That's the story of how the idea came to me. But I still was not over the wound of the Wire Dog and it not working. And that was a big deal that it didn't work. And I put money into that, got a loan for it, and it blew up in my face. Don't regret doing it, but I'm just saying I couldn't get over that. So guess what? I was scared of it, and I wasn't willing to be resilient. I wasn't willing to maybe exercise a little bit of courage. I wasn't willing to take that step because I had the fear of what might happen again. And that's something, we all know this, but the listeners that are thinking about, do I do this? Do I do X? Do I do Y? Do I take that risk? I'm going to tell you about the Wire Dog. I lost what little I had. I lost it. I would repeat it 10 times over for the lessons I got from it. So it was years later. I'm just telling you that it was years later before I actually decided that I'm going to do this. My family thought I was crazy. It created extraordinary friction in the family, but I continued to move forward with it. And my response to them was, I had this little saying, and the saying was basically, I appreciate what you're saying. I'm going to do this. And if God gave me this idea, then he'll provide for this idea. That's all I can tell you. And I would say it over and over and over to them. That was my canned response. So that product ended up becoming what's called a childhood health passport. It was the size of a passport. It evolved into a medications journal. It evolved to an adult health passport, a senior citizens health passport, one for dogs and cats, a financial health passport. There were some online things that were going to happen, and we were selling it at hospitals around the country. And we were doing just well enough that we created this business plan, and a private equity firm believed in the business plan enough that they decided they were going to invest $3 million in the business. And everything I had was in that business. Heart, soul, sweat, tears, money, everything. Family was involved in the business. My wife deeply, as you can imagine, deeply loved the business. My wife's one of those people where If a turtle's crossing the interstate, we're blocking the interstate to protect the turtle. And so that was her emotional connection to this product. So the childhood health passport funded for $3 million. I tell people this, I will never, ever forget, ever. Back then, that was when you could call the bank and a human being would answer. And I told them who I was. I said, could you do me a favor and check the balance on my account? And she told me the number, and I started crying on the phone. I hit the lottery. And so that was the product that got patented. And it was an amazing, amazing journey to get to that point. But do you want to hear very briefly the rest of the story?
Sure.
Yes.
6 months later, that private equity firm fired me and the management team and stole the company. How about them apples?
Yeah. So, and I saw that. Do
You knew it
you
was
still?
coming, didn't you, Julie?
I did, but did you own the patent or did the private equity own the patent?
Yeah, great. So yes, I owned the patent up until the point to when the private equity firm invested, right? One of the requirements of the investment, which makes total sense, is that I had to pledge my ownership to the company to be the asset to bring about the value to the company for them to invest the capital. Makes total sense. And again, that's normal, right? And so of course I'm making this sound out like I'm a hero in this thing and it was all their fault. Well, it was their fault how they handled it. We could have done things differently, but the long and short of it is we sit down at a board meeting. They were on the phone remotely and they said, we're going to turn right. And we as the management team said, no, we're going to continue forward. We invented the product. We have the relationship with the customers. We know where we're going. You don't know what you're talking about, blah, 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 blah. We're going forward. We were kind of militaristic about it. We're going forward. And we had the power to do that, by the way. As the president of the company, had the power to say that. But that was where my very first lesson, this is for everybody listening. There's a extraordinary difference in your life of having power versus control. They had control and I had power. And don't ever confuse those two. You have the power to make decisions. Let's just use the military. I have the power to make decisions as a sergeant, as a private, as an E4, as a whatever. But that doesn't mean I'm in control. The fact that I have the power to make decisions. And I lost sight of that.
So where did you land after you came out of that experience? So there was $3 million in your bank account. They were investing in the company. Does that disappear?
Yeah, everything disappears. Everything. Yeah, there was nothing. We got nothing, zero. I mean,
Yeah.
well, lawsuits, that's what starts. Rage, anger, burn the world down, napalm everything. I mean, honestly, that's why the rage fueled me like jet fuel every day when I woke up, right? But you can't live that way, at least for a long period of time. It takes you to places you don't intend to be. And anyway, during that process of developing that product, we actually met some other gentlemen that had invented another product outside of this industry. And we had licensed that from them. And so my brother-in-law and I actually kind of threw our life into that product through that license and that proprietary product. And we launched, another, if you will, business off of that while we were suing that company and going through that drama. And that was the sad thing about it, is that we got to the point where the judge had signaled that he was going to rule in our favor. And we even got a call from the private equity firm to our lawyer. And he basically said, hey, listen, let's all be reasonable here. Let's just get it over with. We'll pay. Let's just be reasonable and get it over with. And 24 hours later, to this day, I'll never know what happened other than somebody must have got to the judge. But 24 hours later, the judge was sitting right there. We're just waiting for him to say we won. And he ruled in favor of the defendants. You know what I mean? And that was it. It was over. Game, set, match.
That I mean, I've never been in that situation, but like going from the wire dog not working out to then the childhood health passport, that whole debacle, I guess, right? Like,
Crisis.
yeah, like how, what made you, I guess, just continue on, just continue down an entrepreneurial journey
Yep.
from those two things because, that's a lot of just getting beat up, really.
It is. It is. But again, this is what makes me so thankful to be here with you two and talking to your listeners. Because I'm going to talk about things, as far as I'm concerned, are the most important lessons if you're going to go out and do X, whatever X is. This is where the rubber meets the road, man. Let's talk about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I am thankful that I can share what I had to sacrifice to other people to help other people. So thank you for letting me do that, because I love talking about this. And so, yes, wire dog, yes, health passport, medical career, all that stuff. Okay. I mean, I don't remember the exact timeline, but a couple of years later, I asked all of the questions that we ask as human beings of how did this happen? What did you do wrong? God abandoned me. I mean, everything. I went through every loop 57,000 times, it felt like. And I got far enough away from it that one day a thought came to me, and that thought was single word, stewardship. I thought, what the heck is this about? And the abbreviated answer is I began relating that word back to everything that happened. I talked to you earlier about power versus control. That later came to me under the envelope of stewardship versus ownership. Is that I was treating the business and the invention as if I owned it. It was mine, that grip, right? Like reaching into a bucket and grabbing a handful of water. And what gave me extraordinary peace was realizing, wow, this was really at the end of the day about stewardship. And when you have this mindset of stewardship over your health, over your relationships, over your friends, over your business, over your finances, when you have this mindset of stewardship, then you don't worry about things being moved, changed. Things are going to happen. And so the answer to your question is, looking back, I was able to say I should have approached this from a stewardship standpoint. And yes, it would have been painful if it happened, but nowhere near as painful from a stewardship mindset. Because now in my life, when things come into my life or leave my life, I don't have a hand there trying to grab it. I'm very thankful and have gratitude about that. But when it leaves, I'm thankful for the lessons that it taught me. And guess what? I cannot even, we need another 3 podcasts for me to tell you about the lessons that I learned from the Wire Dog in college, in the military, and the failure of the childhood health passport, of the gifts that it gave me. One of the chapters in my book is literally an entire chapter devoted to the gifts are in the pain. So I don't run from that anymore. I actually look for that. And the military kind of taught me that when I look back on it.
We talk about what the phrase in the military is embracing the suck. What you're talking about too, Scott, is with stewardship is I think you're able to maintain a little bit more of an objective, perspective, separate yourself. Like you're talking about how close in you were and you start to get the tunnel vision and the blinders on. But I think if you're able to steward something, you're able to step back and it's almost like that out of body experience. Like you're
It
watching
is.
yourself do it, right?
It is, Mark. Brad, that's an excellent way to describe it. And again, for me, once I learned these things, then that was another platform, and I had to wrestle with that platform, and then there's another platform. That's part of that growth process that we all go through.
I guess so from all that and, looking back, is that what got you into the journey of writing your book, Wake Up to Die Again?
You won't believe this. Most people don't believe this, but when I talk about these events, it doesn't even emotionally move me because I learned so much from it. I really, there was no, I mean, at the time, yes, there was emotional trauma, but I mean, it's a 0.0 for me. You know what I mean? Hell, I laugh. I love telling the story, believe it or not. I love seeing people's faces too when I drop the bomb at the end. But no, again, it was years later. And during COVID, everybody had different experiences during COVID. But for me, my wife was not teaching at the time. I was working from home for a few months, and we would take walks together at lunch. We got to know our neighbors better. I mean, we didn't have a bad COVID experience. Kids were healthy. Yeah, everything was fine. And the little birdie came in my ear and started whispering a little stupid sentence to me. You're not where you're supposed to be. Where does this stuff come from? We all get these voices, right? I'm like, what are you talking about? Where does this, and I just ignored it. Was doing my workouts and living life. It just kept pressing in on me. And what ultimately I wrestled with that as well. I resolved what I was telling myself had nothing to do with I'm not where I'm supposed to be. What was really the underlying issue, Julie, was that what was bothering me and what came to the surface was all these broken promises that I'd made to myself that I didn't do. And maybe it was the silence of COVID that I was slowing down enough, you know what I mean, and taking walks. Maybe it was just because it was quiet that this stuff came to me. But those broken promises were things like, Scott, you've been saying for 20 years, you swore on your life you were going to do an Ironman. Where are we at, brother? Tell me about that book you started and stopped, and the one you told your family, for a long time. You're going, where are we at on the book, man? So these little broken promises, not little, these big broken promises and little ones came to the surface. And I just started, honestly, I turned to them. I didn't run from them. I turned to them. I said, my God, I started writing all this stuff down. When you turn to yourself and unpack what's chasing you or bothering you, and you address that honestly and transparently, you're faced with a freaking choice: live with it or deal with it. And so I picked the one thing that made the hair on my back of my neck stand up, and that was to do an Ironman. So that was the genesis. And when I finished the Ironman, the 140.6 mile race in Tempe, Arizona, when I finished that, I was doing and still do half Ironman races. And that's when I said to myself, I self-inflicted this. Hey, man, congratulations on the Ironman. Pat yourself on the back, brother. You're not done yet. Remember that book? And people ask me too, so that was the genesis of it. It was broken promises. And people ask me, Scott, why now? Why my coach at the very beginning, why are you writing the book now? I need an answer for that. Before we agree to work together, why now? I said, you're not going to believe this, Jeffrey, but the book's been ready for a long time. I wasn't.
I was thinking midlife crisis in the back of my mind, but you didn't run out and buy like a red Corvette. You're like, these are things I still, I've got unfinished business. And perhaps that comes with wisdom too, right? Like as you're getting to a certain point in your life and you start reflecting back on the
Yep.
successes and the
Yep.
failures and what trajectory you're on. And you're like, you start asking yourself, am I doing it right? Am I making the right
Yep.
decisions? Am I doing right by my family?
Yeah.
Right? Like you're starting to ponder all those things, but you created momentum by taking that first step, literally and figuratively, for the Ironman.
Yeah.
And then that moves you again on like a positive trajectory towards becoming an author, published author.
That's correct.
So you build the momentum. When did you actually complete the book?
I completed it. Well, it's been complete for a while. There's a long editing process that you go through, right? Which is just torturous, I might say. But about 10 days ago, it went live on Amazon.com, Wake Up to Die Again, and it raced straight to the top. It was a #1 new release, and the highest it got was #2 bestseller. And
So
it was amazing. And I'm already starting to get feedback from some of the people who I can't believe they read it so fast. And and I had a guy, honestly, he sent me an email and he said, you've had me laughing and crying through the first 6 chapters. I had to set this down. I have to think about what you're making me think about.
are you already thinking a second book?
Yeah,
Is
I
that
already know. Well, I know what my second book is. I already know that. I came to that conclusion again. Weirdly, I'm also a columnist for a newspaper. My stories are published every Saturday. And it's stuff like we're talking about: resilience and family and transformation, all these things. It was actually through that process, which was simultaneous to writing the book, I actually figured out what my second book is. But here's the real thing I'm learning from my beta readers and my new readers. I really believe with my heart and soul that what I learn from readers, they're going to teach me what the second book is.
I saw it on your website. You have a newsletter, or people can sign up to talk to you after they read the book and get that insight. So is that kind of how you're going to do that? Is through that?
Yeah, we're actually going to modify the web. This is so fresh, but you just nailed it. We're going to modify the website so that people can get a hold of me directly through the website, because I really want to hear their stories. And it centers around this. And I think you both will relate to this. This came from my son. I'm stealing this from my son. We were driving in the car the other day, and something came up about, man, Dad, everybody's just talking to everybody. We were talking about social media and stuff. Everybody's just talking to everybody. I said, you're right, but nobody's having conversations anymore. And that just struck me when he said that, and I responded that way because it was an organic comment. And that's what I want to do about my book. I don't want to talk to anybody about my book. I want to have a conversation about it as a human being, right? And that's what I most look forward to, because some of the things that they've said to me, had another person tell me about the book. And again, I would have never said this, but he goes, Scott, this book's crazy. He goes, it met me exactly where I am. He goes, there's no 7 steps to do anything in my book whatsoever. It's lived experience. But what the guy was telling me was that I could, in you telling your story, it was exactly my story, but my facts are just different. And I was just blown away by that, because I never thought about that one time in the 2 years it took me to write it. So that's what I hope to have, is conversations. I don't want to talk to anybody. I want to have conversations about it, because I think we get better as neighbors and friends and human beings. And that's what I love about what you're doing, is we're having a conversation. We need more of this.
Yeah, and I think your son, I guess, hit the nail on the head. It's just everybody's talking at each other, but like you said, we just don't have conversations. And I think for a lot of people are feeling that because you're not the first person that said that. And it's so important for all of us, I think, to be able to move ourselves forward is to
Yep.
hear from others and their lived experiences, and then also talk about those with each other. And
Yep.
because a lot of us have been through the same things, but we've never opened up or been vulnerable to have those discussions or those
That's right.
conversations and how we can help each other. So I applaud you for that. I think that's amazing.
Do want to say one thing you mentioned about veterans. One of my beta readers, I'd never met this man in my life. And he was always walk in front of the house with his dog. Every Saturday morning, I'd see him out my dining room window. And one day, I decided I was going to go. I could tell he was military a mile away, right? So one day I went out. One Saturday morning, I went out and introduced myself. Sure enough, he was a retired B-52 colonel pilot. We get to talking out there in front of my house, and next thing you know, the guy said, we're just a few minutes. He says, "Listen," he said, "I got to get to the house. I'm going somewhere with my wife." He said, "Let me pray for you real quick." Right there in the middle of the street, puts his hand on my shoulder and prays for me. He leaves. And of course, we exchanged cell phone numbers. I'm going to fast forward to I finished a run one day and early in the morning, and I turned in front of my house to see probably one of the most glorious, beautiful sunrises I've ever seen in my life with the moon hanging up there. And it brought tears to my eyes. It became the cover of my book. Okay. See that? There's the moon up there. I actually took that picture. And I'm telling you this story because the other day, I'm sorry, his name's Norm. Norm was one of my beta readers. And when he finished the book as a military colonel pilot, he said, "Scott, this book was so impactful to me that I'm going to be the first person that buys 20 of your books, a case of your books. And I'm going to hand these out to everybody I know."
Cool.
And he did it. And I made him come down to my house before I'd give them to me and stand in that same spot where I took that picture where he prayed over me. And I hold up that book. And so we could take a picture together before I gave him those 20 books. And that, he's a little older than I am, but it really hit my heart because he is a veteran's veteran. Okay. And it really hit my heart because for him, and even chiseled, man, but for him to tell me the things, I won't spoil it, but for him to tell me the things that he got out of the book as a veteran, a retired colonel, right? That really taught me a lot of why I really hope and pray that I'm going to be able to work with veterans and have conversations and maybe this book will impact them in a way that I hear from them. So I'm really thankful for that.
That's a perfect cover of your book.
Scott, our podcast is for the military veteran, military connected community, what would be a piece of advice that you have learned in all of in your journey from Wire Dog to today with a successful book that you would give to those who are looking to turn their dog tags into ownership?
Well, to my veteran brothers and sisters and those still serving, thank you. I love you. And this is what I want to tell you. Never, ever lose the gifts that the military gave you. Be resilient. Move forward. Be who you are. Be who you're meant to be. Honor yourself. Honor your family. Be disciplined. Be courageous. You don't have to be perfect. And this is the one thing I want to leave with. I want you to do all those things that were given to us. It wasn't perfect, but the things that were given to us and we adopted wasn't perfect. But here's the one thing I want you to remember on top of all that. Don't ever forget to forgive yourself. You don't need the world to do it. You don't need your neighbor. You don't need anybody else. We're all going to make mistakes. And whatever they have been, whatever you fell short on, whatever didn't work out, whatever you thought you got cheated on, lied about, stolen from, whatever it is, don't forget to forgive yourself. You're going to be fine, but start with that. And I and Julie and Matt want to see you on the other side because we got work to do for this country and our family and our friends and our neighbors. So don't lose that gift. That's my message to you.
That's a phenomenal message. And I know we're going to get into our final two questions. So my question, and I'll throw a disclaimer out there or maybe a caveat. You can't pick your book, but is there a book you would recommend maybe in addition to your book to our listeners that's been impactful, that's spoken to you, that's perhaps been life-changing?
Yeah.
Something that you'd plug on the podcast?
I will, and I haven't read it in a while, but actually recently I couldn't find my original copy, and I bought another one because I didn't want to be without it. I got it because in honor of our 250th anniversary, I'm going to reread a book that I absolutely love and I recommend it all the time. It is a book called 1776 and is written by David McAuliffe. And it is a wonderful a book about the birth of our country and what we had to go through and in the days leading up to the start and to the conclusion of what took place after. Best book I've ever written about our history. And so I would encourage people, 1776, and it's just a wonderful book, man.
Fantastic. Yeah, and timely for sure.
Yes, very timely. As you know, we're almost to America 250 and celebrating our country and the birth of our country, being here for 250 years. The last question of every episode, Admiral William McRaven authored the book, Make Your Bed, Little Things That Can Change Your Life and Maybe the World. So do you make your bed every day?
You know, I've watched that video, I bet 15 times. I love him. And I'm going to be honest, I don't make my bed every day. Yep. I'm going to be honest. But I did want to say this though, because I thought about this and it's really true. But what I do, and this is going to sound, I think it's going to sound terrible, and I don't mean it to. I am exceptional at making sure I do the small things. I wasn't always this way, but I am exceptional at doing the small things because I learned the hard way. The small things turn out to be big things, and the big things are painful. And those small things, just to use the Ironman workouts, I didn't become an Ironman and crossing the finish line. That was get the medal ceremony. I became an Ironman. All those mornings I got up at 4 and 5 in the morning and ran a half marathon before people got out of bed in the rain, right? And swimming in the cold water and still riding my bike with 14 stitches on my elbow. And, you know what I mean? The adversity, that's doing the small things, the willingness to get back up no matter how you feel. And it wasn't perfect, but I made a heck of a lot more yeses than I ever did nos. You know what I mean? So I love that question. But I can't lie to my brothers and sisters. So no, I don't make my bed, but I am excellent at doing the small things.
Well, Scott, I know we are getting close to the end of our time. Thank you so much for spending almost the last hour with us and, sharing your stories, your triumphs and tragedies and being vulnerable with our listeners because we need more of that. And as we talked about it, there's a lot of talking and there's not a lot of listening that's going on, I think.
Right.
And the more we can get together and have a good conversation and learn something from each other, the better we'll be. So again, thanks so much. And we wish you the best of luck with your book and whatever comes after this.
Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough. And you have one of the greatest audiences in the world to speak to. And I feel honored, honestly, to be able to talk to them.
Military One Percenters, whether you're brainstorming your first business idea, already running a company, or just curious about where to start, Dog Tags the Ownership is the place for you. Please hit that subscribe button to receive all new episodes. Also, if you know someone who has turned their dog tags into ownership, drop us a DM on social media or tag someone. We are always looking for new guests to bring onto the podcast. And as always, Military One Percenters, thank you for your service. Let's continue this journey and working together to write our next chapter. Until next week, keep pushing to turn those dog tags into ownership.
From dog tags to ownership, heroes take the lead. Stories of veterans building trains with passion, drive, and speed. From service to success, we're here to inspire the quest. Dog tags to ownership, we're the best.